I'm Carl Franklin. That's Patrick Hines. Hey, Pat.
Hey, Carl. How you doing?
And Dwayne LaFlotte. Hey, Dwayne.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing okay. And I'm not really sure where we're going this week, but I guess we should just start with some of the things that happened, as we always do. And this was a kind of a busy week for security, wasn't it?
It was a super busy week.
Well, it depends on what you include, but yeah.
Well, I think every week, unfortunately, sadly, is a busy week in security, and happy for us because it gives us good things to talk about. So the first thing I'd throw out there is you always hear these headlines of data breaches and, lots of information being released out on the internet.
Right.
And there are two relatively big ones this week that were announced on a Bleeping Computer fantastic site.
Bleepingcomputer.com, huh?
Bleeping Computer. We'll put a link in there. But they have some really good articles.
Okay.
First would be hackers claim to steal data from 100 million T-Mobile customers.
Wow. I heard about that, and I'm really glad I'm not a T-Mobile customer, but I guess it doesn't matter though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, back in 2015, AT&T had a breach, and I hadn't searched back to see whether Verizon had a breach, and it happens.
Yeah. And
the type of data that's released is really important. Like, okay, is it just, email addresses? Great. You can get those pretty much anywhere. Or is it more nefarious things?
Yeah. Credit card or mother's maiden name.
This sounds like, and the investigations aren't done yet, so I will put that out as a proviso.
Okay.
But this sounds like the data is actually pretty damning, including IMEI.
Ooh,
what is that?
About your phone. That's your International Mobile Equipment Identifier. Allows them to route calls to your device.
It's like the VIN number for your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
The phone number, customer name, security PIN, social security numbers, driver license, date of birth, etc. So there may be a fair bit of data in there.
Everything that some nefarious actor would need to steal your identity or sell it.
Exactly. And oddly, they're being sold for relatively cheap, it seems like.
Well, with a software-defined radio and an IMEI, you can probably tell when somebody's in the vicinity.
You could. Yeah, you could. You could listen in on those cellular ranges and see all sorts of information.
Yeah.
Wow. And that was one of them, which is interesting because there's not a lot of detail right now on how that data leaked. So I think over the next few podcasts, maybe we'll get more and more information on what happened there.
Yeah.
Moral of the story, obviously have something watching your credit and making sure that people aren't, doing nefarious things with your name. And then also, make sure that your usernames and passwords and whatnot change all the time.
Isn't that now becoming a monthly thing we have to do?
Mm-hmm. Change everything all the time.
Let's drill on that for a second. You should check your balances and check your credit card statements regularly to see if there's anything weird going on.
Aren't there services that do that for you now? Like you can sign up for something that watches your accounts and
there are. The only one I know of is LifeLock, and I don't. I can't tell you how good it is or bad it is. All I see is the guy on TV.
I've looked into it.
Talking about
they're pretty good, but they're pretty expensive. They're like $40 a month. And for most people, it's like, do I do it myself? If you have an insurance company, like I use USAA insurance because I'm a veteran, and they have something similar that I've looked into. But you got to do it because the problem is that there's so many different ways that somebody can get into your finances nowadays.
Right.
If you're not checking, and if you wait 6 months to check, it's too late probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we're starting to get to the point where the breaches are so common and the places where people use their finances are so vast that you should really just need to do a monthly check and see if everything looks right.
Getting breach fatigue.
Getting there.
Speaking of, moving on to our second one, T-Mobile shouldn't feel bad because because
they have so much company.
There is, because out on the dark webs right now, there is talk about a terrorist watch list of 2 million records that's been exposed from the DOD, I believe.
Department of Defense.
So there was an Elasticsearch server. It's just a indexing server, if you will, that was connected to the internet that had default usernames and passwords. And in the back end, Most of the data has things like passport indicators, has no-fly information, etc.
Wow, Patrick, are you on that list?
I hope so. Actually, no. We designed the system so we make sure my name's always removed.
There you go. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm okay with Big Brother as long as I get to program how it the exclusion list.
Right.
Oh my God.
So it's interesting. I mean, even large governments, they fall prey to the same simple things we talk about of never release anything, ever put anything accessible on the internet with the default username and password.
So here's a question. Has that been attributed to how it was leaked? You said it was leaked by default credentials?
Yeah. So that's an interesting sort of discovery going on still currently. So the data was not discovered on a Department of Homeland Security server. It was actually discovered somewhere else. I believe I'd have to look through the report a little bit further, but it was somebody who had copied all the data down and then had made it, exposed it, and made it available on the internet.
So here's the thing. I think one of the other topics we should talk about today, I don't want to get into a sore topic, but we're liable to see a lot of U.S. intelligence information scraps. This isn't a scrap. It's much more significant than that, but we're liable to see a lot more
what's
scraps.
A scrap? I'm sorry.
Scraps are just small pieces like,
okay.
Like files, dossiers, things like that. Like, pieces of information because of the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Because if you don't properly destroy equipment and if you leave things behind, it's possible that, what did we say, Dwayne? That if you get 1/24 of an inch of a hard drive, you can sometimes read some bits.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And assemble sometimes enough information to suss out what the rest of the data was.
Right. So, I'm sure the military is very good at destroying stuff, but they left in a hurry. They didn't have as much time as they thought.
Right.
In some cases, people are going to be leaving behind their entire apartments and livelihoods, and they may have, sensitive information. So there's going to be some information just from the fact that we withdrew from Afghanistan. And that's why I asked whether we knew how this had been leaked, because it's possible that that's how it got leaked.
Yeah. So, and according to this article here again on Bleeping Computer, the researcher discovered the exposed database July 19th on a server in Bahrain.
Bahrain. If I only had a Bahrain.
I wish I had gone there. I never got to go.
Mm-hmm.
I know somebody who went to Djibouti as a doctor during the Gulf War.
Actually, a friend of mine was in Djibouti.
Yeah.
Insert joke.
Yeah. So it was interesting that it was discovered elsewhere. Obviously the researcher reported to the Department of Homeland Security, and within a couple of days that was pulled down.
Wow.
Actually, hold on. It says the exposed server was taken down about 3 weeks later on August 9th.
Yeah, which means the data is everywhere.
It took a little bit of time.
But it means everybody's got the data.
So to recap, this was somebody who had access to the data and then reformatted it and resubmitted it somewhere. Right.
The current understanding is that it might have been a server that was put on the internet by the U.S. government that had default passwords, and the data was then pulled down and rebroadcasted, if you will.
So again, human error.
Yeah, that would be a human error.
The cause of most of these things, somebody not securing something well enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And, oddly enough, we've been in the middle of a lot of engagements where we're watching a customer's external surface of attack.
Mm-hmm.
So taking a look at all of the IP ranges that are uniquely that company. And, just for a blip, just for a second, we see a server show up in online. And the person who's putting it online doesn't necessarily hardened it yet.
Yeah.
And that's another thing is never have anything touch the internet unless it's hardened first.
Right.
Good usernames and passwords, latest patch versions, etc. You don't want to put it up there and go, okay, now it's connected.
That's been true for years.
Patch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
And you can see as soon as something goes live, if you watch the traffic, you can see within seconds it's being hit.
Yeah, it's fascinating. If you start, for those of you who may not know the term honeypot, but if you start looking at honeypot data, honeypots are servers that security researchers put out on the internet And they literally look at like open devices. They look like they're Swiss cheese, like, usernames and passwords are all defaults or whatever. and they're different pieces of software they're modeling.
Right.
And they, within seconds, see attacks coming in. And what's actually interesting is the more they harden that box, the more unique attacks they see.
So that's because guys like Patrick are out there trying to hack into it. And
actually,
exactly, as soon as it shows up.
Let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about who that is. So when we do talks at code camps and other places, we talk about the pyramid of threats, which is similar
like
to
the labyrinth of pain.
It's very similar. It leads to the labyrinth of pain.
It does. It does.
So the pyramid of threats is something that we've come up with. I'm sure there's other people have different variations, but what we've looked at and seen is, if you look at the very bottom tier of all the threats in the world, the vast majority of them are script kiddies. And I know you're going to ask, well, what's a script kiddie? A script kiddie is someone who gets a script from the internet, from a friend, from a book, from a download site that has a vulnerability, has an exploit in it. Now, 90% of the time, the person who downloads one of these scripts gets infected with something themselves. But that's aside the point. A script that a script kiddie would use would be something that like tries to exploit Print Nightmare, for example, or the recent SAM. It's a known vulnerability.
The Exchange proxy login. It's like something along those lines.
It's a patched vulnerability. It might be 10 years old. It might be 2 days old. But they didn't write the script, but they have it.
They found it, and they want to try it.
They want to be cool, and they want to be cool. They want to be Dwayne. They want to be a hacker.
Wow!
You know?
Wow! Well, I think you'd be the first person to ever call me cool.
I don't know if that was
my entire life, but thank you.
I don't know if that was a compliment or a backhanded insult or what that was.
Yes, it was. But for whatever reason, they either want to cause mayhem, or they think they want street cred or whatever it is. I mean, we've had people we've dealt with who've made threats. And we've kind of sussed out and who've claimed to be hackers. Yeah. Who turned out definitely not to be hackers. But anyways, these, for whatever reason, they're not technical people, but they know how to use the script because they're pretty easy to use. And they just point it with an automated system to run against every IP address in the world, literally every IP address in the world.
Right.
And what happens is if there's 100 million of them out there at any given moment, which I'm sure there are, then your system's going to get hit a few times every couple of minutes by one of them.
Yep.
And some of them are run by, more high level hackers because they're just trying to look for easy, low hanging, targets. And some are, as Dwayne said, the higher level. And so script kiddie is the lowest level, and that's the noise level. And if you patch, and if you have current systems, you're going to probably stop them. And then each level of the pyramid gets more and more specialized, more and more high tech. And they're more and more likely to be only going after targeted people.
Right.
But that's what we're up against. Right now, the noise level, it would be like if every kid in the street, every time they walked by a car, they tried the door to see if they could steal something out of it. It's that kind of environment on the internet. So it's a rough neighborhood.
The internet's a rough neighborhood.
It is.
I'll keep that in mind. I'll put that on a bumper sticker.
Did you ever see the Chappelle show when he said, "What if the internet was a real place?"
No.
It's not safe for work.
It's funny.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, I like the pyramid of threats. That should be the name of this show.
Oh, cool. All right.
Because that's some real stuff we can sink our teeth into.
Yeah. It's understanding the threats is a big part of it, because that's... if you're going to go someplace and you kind of understand how rough of a neighborhood it is, you'll take the right precautions. Most people where I live don't lock their doors, but they have huge dogs and guns. But the problem isn't getting into my house; it's getting out. But that's in other places. If you would definitely lock your doors. I know other people who haven't left the door unlocked for 12 years.
Yeah.
So we're used to that in the physical world. We just need to have that same cognizance.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Patrick. Getting into your house is not hard, but getting out of your house is hard. So that brings up another interesting thing that was released this week about data exfiltration.
Exfiltration?
Exfiltration.
Okay.
Exfil in the OPSEC, I don't know, word whatever.
Control, my cover is blown. I need exfil.
Exactly. So let's say I have a beachhead. I've made it into your network somehow. And that could be by phishing. That could be by somebody taking a USB and plugging it in. That could be by somebody running a malicious piece of software. It could be by somebody going to browserupdates.org or .com or whatever and trying to force update their browser because they got an email saying they should. Whatever it is, right? I have software running in your environment. The next thing I need to do is figure out how do I communicate from the inside of your environment to the outside of your environment.
Without being detected.
How do I get to my C2 servers, right?
Without being detected, Without
being detected. And that's the key, because there's a lot of really good software out there that detects, even if it's full SSL chained communications, that will go in the middle of that traffic and figure out what you're doing and who you're talking to, and have blacklisted IPs and blacklisted ranges externally.
I see.
So it makes it really tough.
So I guess what you're saying is exfiltration is being able to avoid being detected. You get in, you said the word beachhead. That means like you have a way in.
Yes.
Like you found your way in now. How do you send data? So somebody goes into Patrick's house. It's great. But Patrick has these, inspection code that tells him when somebody's on a cell phone that he doesn't recognize.
Dogs.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The dogs. That's right. So somebody found a way to put the dogs to sleep, in other words.
Right.
So that they could call out and say, hey, I'm in Pat's house and here's the information.
Yeah, exactly. It's not super useful to be in Pat's house if you're, taking spy camera pictures of documents and trying to send them out, but you can't send them anywhere. You can never get out of the house.
Right.
So there was a release this week on how hackers are leveraging certain types of Cisco systems to actually send out information and exfil it that way. So there's certain parts of what they call a server name identification. I won't go into super detail here, but.
And Cisco, for those who don't know, is just a manufacturer of network appliances that people use on the internet, routers and
big one,
switches and stuff. They pretty much run the internet.
So they have a way of inspecting encrypted traffic to see what's going on. But what's weird is even that inspection system, there's a small piece of data you can add to the beginning of it that is not inspected, that goes out in the end of the network. So they can literally leverage these devices to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to put just nothing in the body of the encrypted data.
So nobody cares. It's like they called it
outside. I'm going to put a bumper sticker that is actually the data, and it's going to go out to
it was like a hello packet, like a ping or something, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so that Pat's not going to suspect the ping. The dogs are asleep, and he's pretty screwed at that point.
So it's fascinating to look at these things where even devices that are designed to look for this type of traffic, people find unique ways of bypassing them. And that's, I'd say most networks, you don't need any of that sophistication. Yeah. If you're on the network, most of the time you can just send data out without anybody ever knowing or being the wiser. But,
what's really funny is I'm reading this Bleeping Computer article about these Cisco hacks, and right below that there's an ad for Cisco. Coincidenza?
Now with more hacks.
It is pretty cool, and if you're interested, we have the links on the webpage, securitysthisweek.com, and if you go to episode 5, which is what this is, you'll see those links. And if you really want to get into it's pretty technically detailed in terms of how they did it.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. This is interesting because a lot of people want to get into security. And if you listen to this podcast, you're either interested in what's going on in security or you're interested in getting into security. And the world needs more security engineers, especially those without records.
Right.
Yes. We need more, Boy Scouts to become
so much for you, Pat.
Scouts. Hey, squeaky clean.
Squeaky clean.
Yeah. I would insert a joke here, but it would not be user friendly.
Yeah.
No, I know that joke, and you can't say that in most states.
So, one of the ways that I learned about computers back in the dawn of the computing industry is I just tried to understand terms. And that's one of the reasons it's so useful for you, Carl, to hold us to the standard of let's not throw around a lot of buzzwords. Let's define our terms. you need to consume content where you understand the vocabulary, where you understand the concepts, where you understand you need to get an inch deep before you get a mile wide.
Right.
And so that's what we need to do. And security, when we train someone to join our team, we know we have a long-term job of trying to train them, because they don't need to just know security. That's not a thing. You can't just know security. You have to know a lot about a lot of systems. You have to know enough about SQL to understand how SQL injection works. You have to understand enough about email to understand how DNS works. You have to know enough about
and this is where eyes are rolling back in their heads.
I understand that, but I mean, to be really great at it, there's also on ramps where you can do things like learn Security Plus, and you can do audits, and you can do, controls where it's very defined. You're following checklists.
But there's also just genuine curiosity, like the thing that I was talking about that kept me up all night. Just obsessed with trying to figure out what this thing does and why it does what it does, and started hacking it.
But I bet that while you were hacking it, there were a couple of things you didn't understand that you had to go check and understand and look up, and you widened your knowledge.
That's right. I actually did. Yeah.
And so that's part of it. But a lot of people ask me, well, how do I get into this security thing? And the problem is you can't just learn security. You got to learn how to apply security to things that exist in the world that people care about.
Right. And problem solving and all of those. Yeah.
So you can become an expert in web development and then a security expert in web, but you can't be a security expert in web development if you don't understand the web.
Right.
So
sure.
Chicken and egg, I guess.
Yeah. So there's another one that happened, right? And I don't even know how to pronounce this, Dwayne, but it has to do with allowing takeover of Windows domains. And before you explain that,
that's the big one.
Yeah. Before you explain that, let me explain what a Windows domain is for those who don't know. So some of you probably have Macs and you're sitting at home and you've never worked in a corporation where there was a Windows server that acted as a quote unquote domain controller. But these have been around since the 90s, I would say, right? And Windows NT and Windows Server. And essentially these are particularly designated servers that you run inside your company that handle the security of your employees. And so they're called a domain controller because the domain would be like your enterprise, if you're working for, I don't know, Subway sandwiches, your domain would be Subway, So within that domain of this private company, all of the people who have accounts, this acts as your sort of centralized
security bounder,
security authenticator and authorizer and all of that stuff.
So it's confusing because domain is also used with the internet, like, Google.com is a domain.
Right.
In this case, the domain is more like a kingdom.
Yeah.
Where the domain controllers, they are the security. They are the security adjudicator, if you will. In other words, if Dwayne tries to do something, he has to have credentials from the domain controller.
Yeah, they're kind of like the boss.
To do anything in the domain.
The big boss.
From here on out, though, in every domain, I'm going to call normal user accounts peasants.
That's great.
And I'm going to call the domain administrator the Lord.
My Lord.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly, because I think the fiefdom analogy is fantastic. It is.
Okay, so tell me about this petty podum or whatever the heck, how do you ever pronounce it, this attack? What happened?
Petite podum, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure how they pronounce that. I was a French researcher who discovered this. So it's been, Microsoft unfortunately has gotten a couple black eyes over the last few months recently in some very old pieces of the Windows operating system that's existed since the dawn of time.
Right.
So the first one we may have heard of was the print nightmare, right? Where there's all these issues. There were multiple issues with the printer service. So let's say you're at home and you go to print. Well, you have a Windows service that sits there, which a service is just a piece of software that runs in the background that manages the printer, right? That has the print queue and knows who can print and all that good stuff. Well, that service that's running on your computer or running on a domain connected network has the ability to listen to print jobs remotely, right? So I could say, I want to print on Patrick's, whatever printer's attached to Patrick's computer. That remote control is RPC, remote procedure commands. I can go and remotely tell another piece of software to do something. Well, the problem is a lot of those RPC style applications were written literally decades ago. So there's all sorts of new discovered exploits that are coming down the pipe.
And just in case you don't know, dear listener, software developers love working on the new and shiny, not the old and crusty. And that's a fundamental reason why a lot of these things get dusty and they aren't kept up.
Right. So it's interesting. You take the printer attack, and there were a couple different attacks there. One of them was what we had talked about last time, which was a priv-esque, or 2 episodes ago, which is privilege escalation up to administrator, because you have that token. Another one was what was called a relay attack. And a relay attack is interesting. Think like Patrick has this supersonic ray gun.
And he does. I've seen it.
And he does. And he does.
Hey.
And he's trying to shoot me with it, which he normally tries.
Okay.
And I instead of taking the blast, I take a mirror and I redirect it to you. And now Patrick has shot you.
Yeah.
Right? That's in essence what a relay attack is. Something's coming towards me. It's probably either a credential, an NTLM, credential, or something along those lines, something that you're trying to authenticate to me.
Right.
And then I just take that and I redirect it out to another server. Yeah. And then I add a couple commands saying, hey, what I also want you to do is give me administrative access or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of in the simplest terms what a relay attack is. So this new attack, like I said, there's all these RPCs, remote pieces of software listening for commands. Yeah. The printer one's been shut down, Microsoft's patch. Most people have shut it off. So there's just researchers looking for other RPC style applications that they can manipulate to do dark things. And a researcher did discover, let's see, French security researcher. I'm going to butcher his name, I'm sure. Gilly Lionel, aka Topotam, had discovered this NTLM sort of printer API relay.
NTLM is LAN manager. It's an old technology for managing networks on Windows.
Which is funny since NT means new technology.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but not so new anymore. But also dug into the looking for another RPC and found the Microsoft Encrypted File System RPC.
Oh, no.
So that's now another sort of remote procedure command protocol where you can then go make remote commands and was able to then weaponize that where you can relay out attacks to that as well. So now we're finding other pieces of software. So this is kind of an extension of the printer nightmare.
Oh my God.
Not really, because it's a different piece of software.
I think what I hear you saying is that somebody could take over that domain controller and therefore the entire Windows domain.
Correct. So every user, add yourself to the domain, pull down the user accounts database and crack all the passwords, complete ownership of the domain, the fiefdom. The lordship.
Wow. That is huge.
That's big.
Yes. So it's interesting. I think honestly, these style of attacks, outside of nation states are relatively new. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to start to see a lot of researchers digging really, really deep into really old RPC style applications to see if there are some open doors there that just nobody's dug into.
Wow.
And they're going to find them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the bad guys are doing the same kind of snooping. They're just not telling everybody when they find them. No, that's the whole idea. The idea is that bad guys are going to look for this at the same time. And if the good guys find them, because a lot of people are mad about, they shouldn't be disclosing these because they're just feeding the bad guys. Bad guys, they're going to find it if they're not stupid.
Yeah, you'd like to think that all the bad guys are absolute morons and just run scripts they find on the internet, but honestly, they're not.
No.
A lot of them are really super talented security researchers. And they're either funded by nation states, so they're actually doing work for other governments, or they're funded by, organized criminal organizations.
Other bad guys.
Other bad guys.
Wow.
To do really high level, deep security research and keep that to themselves.
So this article says that there's no way to block petit potem, but you can harden the HTTP service, which is the web service that exposes those RPCs, to avoid this relay. And there's actually a video that shows you a demonstration of the attack. And there's a couple of suggestions that you can do to remove web enroll, which I guess is a feature that you don't need, and disable NT-Landman and use Kerberos instead, which is another security protocol.
Right.
And then there's some other things to do, but you should read this if this is.
I think it's harder to mitigate against an internal actor than an external actor.
Yeah, right.
And what that means is that when we talk to most people about a pen test we always ask, so what threats are you trying to mitigate?
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a loaded question because they should be all threats.
Yeah.
Because internal threats are 10 times more costly on average.
Right.
Because they're so hard to defend against. And quite frankly, often companies will say, no, we just care about the external threats and they don't consider the internal.
Wow.
That's got to change because the internal threats are real. They're real. They happen. And more often than not, they go undetected.
Not only just if you consider your, employees. I mean, you could do background checks on your employees and all that good stuff. Doesn't necessarily mean, some organization's not going to hand them $200,000 for the domain admin account for your network.
Right.
But you also, if you're a company that deals with 3PL people, right? If it's third party, different companies or locations who are vendors or partners or whatever, they may have access to your network as well in a certain way. And that's another vector to come in through I might have a third party vendor that I deal with who's not heavy security. And then, a hacker breaches their site and then comes straight over the bridge that has been created between the two sites to ours.
Yeah. Supply chain.
So I want to go back to the pyramid of threats because this is a really good conceptual model, but we only got to the base of the pyramid. So the idea is that at the base of the pyramid is the widest threat vector, but is also the easiest to protect yourself against, right?
Definitely.
And so that's the script kiddies, the guys, the people who are out there, they just downloaded some virus and they want to see if they can infect you. Yeah.
They're pre-technical. They're people who they don't have any ownership of the technology. They're just anarchists and would-be criminals and ne'er-do-wells.
Right. So they don't really have any bad intentions.
They might have bad intentions, but they don't have any skills.
Yeah.
They're just regurgitating something someone else prepared.
And they're probably not going to do anything that could land them in jail because they're afraid to get caught.
Well, I don't think that's the case.
No, really?
Because they're broadcasting. It's like the way the analogy I typically use is the kid who wants to, just steal something and tries the door of every car in a parking lot. Right. And if they get in, they're going to steal something. And they're not worried about somebody seeing them because they're either in a country that's non-extradition or they're too stupid to know. I'm not afraid of insulting the script kiddies because they're not really a threat if you've done anything to prepare yourself for security. If you have patched, if you've got reasonable passwords, if you have passwords, let alone, that aren't default, they're not going to get you. They're not dangerous unless you leave your car door unlocked.
Right. So what's the next level up the pyramid?
The next level up the pyramid is the techie with a grudge. So this is, I put the numbers, we're guessing on the numbers, but if I had to guess, I'd say there's 100 million plus script kiddies at any given time, just based on what we see from the numbers of hits that you get, in the logs. I think there's probably at any given time, probably 10 million people in the world who are techies in some way, shape, or form, programmer, network engineer, break fix, desktop support, whatever, who hate someone and have decided to make it their life's goal to make their life miserable.
Yeah.
And whether it's their old employer or their old significant other or their neighbor. Yeah. It's just somebody who is going to try to hack their neighbor's Wi-Fi.
I'm going to blow up the building.
Well, that's another level, but basically it's the only difference between them and the script kiddie is that they're persistent because they have a single target and they have some technical knowledge, but they don't have deep pockets typically.
But also they're really targeted to you, right. Whereas a script kiddie will be running a
promiscuous.
Script. Yeah, we'll be running a script against every IP address in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So like if you had somebody, that you had jilted along the way, Carl, they might decide that they're going to try to log into your blog and post horrible things, so they're going to guess your password. And they might spend, an hour a night trying to guess your password on your blog.
Yeah.
And if they get in, they're going to do nasty things. And if they don't, you'll never know.
Right.
Unless you check your logs. So with them, it's more about the monitoring. It's more about, having firewalls configured.
Yeah.
Having, close the ports, because they're going to be running a couple of tools. They won't run sophisticated tools. They'll run the free tools.
Close the ports, meaning give your applications less places where somebody can
minimize
connect.
the surface area. You want to minimize the surface area. So if I think a burglar is going to break in, I'm going to check all the windows to see which,
right.
If I could make windows in my house disappear, that would make it harder for the burglar.
That's why they call them ports, because they're a way in.
That's right.
I've been talking about this stuff for a long, long time. I actually wrote a book for John Wiley and Sons on the internet and how it works back in the day. And if you think about an IP address, that identifies a connection to a network. You could have two network cards in a Wi-Fi thing in your computer, and therefore you would have 3 IP addresses based on those connections. So the IP address doesn't identify a computer; it identifies a connection, and the port identifies really an application or a service that is being accessed on that.
I think of it as a big office building. So the Empire State Building has a single address, but each suite number is like the port.
And you might have seen this too if you've been asked to go to a URL that's like https : whatever domain.com and then a colon and a number. That number is the port, and then / whatever.
Yeah. But you're still going to a port. It's just that it's a default port based on what you're doing. Like for web browsing, it's port 80 or 443.
Yeah.
So the hacker with a grudge is my second category, my second tier.
Very good.
Then the next tier is criminal syndicates. And there's probably 10,000 of them operating, where it's multiple people with more resources, and they're in it for the buck. They're trying to phish you. They're trying to do identity theft. They're trying to get your passwords. They're trying to, extort you. And I'd say there's probably maybe there's more than 10,000, maybe there's hundreds of thousands, but they're more sophisticated. They're more social engineering. They're more likely to get you to click on something.
And these are sometimes governments or branches of governments or government sponsored organizations.
So these, we're not there yet.
Oh, okay.
You're thinking in the right direction, but we're not there yet. These are typically people who make their living stealing from people on the internet. So, the fake data center, the fake data center that's trying to get, people to give them their credit card number over the thing.
Or download a piece of software because your computer has a virus and they call you
the phishers.
Yep. Right.
Quote unquote, Microsoft sees the virus.
Okay,
on your
I got
computer.
you.
So the next level is the hacktivists, the people who are larger groups with very good skills who are trying to save the world or trying to destroy the world or whatever they care about.
They have a cause.
Yeah. Yes. And they're typically a bigger network. They typically have deeper pockets because they have a bigger network. And they typically have very skilled individuals.
Yeah.
That's a rarefied group. Most of them have gone underground now. You don't hear much about LulzSec or Anonymous or any of that stuff because the government's done a good job of tamping them down, but they still exist.
Yeah.
And then the next layer is the organization that is in the employ of large enterprises and governments.
Okay, that's what I was talking about. So these guys are at the fourth layer.
Yeah, they're. I'd be surprised if there's more than 1,000 in the category that I'm describing. These are organizations with millions of dollars in tools and expertise. And, these are people who spend, what we would consider $60,000 to $100,000 per person in training and resources.
Yeah.
They They're not nation states, but they're damn close as far as their capabilities.
Like Google, if you take Google Project Zero,
which is
they're a group that discover zero-day exploits, things that haven't been patched, that could be used in mass panic on the internet to cause all sorts of problems. Yeah. And that group discovers these things and releases them. And sometimes what's interesting is the things they discover and release are actively being used by nation states.
Right.
So they're like, and there are stories in the background I've never checked to see whether they're real or not, that, where either the NSA or the CIA go to Google Project Zero and say, hey, what are you guys doing? You guys are killing us here.
Right.
We have some exploits that we're using. You guys, and you guys are finding it. And they release it and they let people know, hey, here's what we found. And here's how you can, we've already contacted the vendor and here's a patch or whatever. Yeah. If you were to take that group with the money that Google pours into them, and then say, "Oh wait, we're going to go dark, and we're going to do very dark.
We're going to do someone's bidding."
Ransomware out. Yeah, that's the group. That's the type of group.
So Fancy Bear is the one that I think of all the time. Fancy Bear is a Russian group that is attributed to the DNC hack and various ransomwares, and they're believed to be in the employ of the Russian government. There's strong reasons to believe they have links to the GRU and other Russian intelligence organizations.
Okay.
They operate out of Russia, or Russian territory, Russian protected territories. They're pretty much Equation Group is an American equivalent. Remember, a bunch of hacking tools got released by an organization called Equation Group got hacked. They're probably a company that was in the employ of the American government, though I don't have any proof of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, quite frankly, this is the level that Dwayne and I in our organization aspire to be, but I can't, I'm not going to sit here and say we're there. We try really hard. And we're certainly not hacktivists. And then the last level is nation state. And the difference between the last level I just talked about, a nation state, is the nation state can kidnap a family and make you go in suicide mission to go take care of something.
Wow.
Nobody else has got that level of power.
Right.
A small third world nation could spend $1 billion to take me off the map, and they'd probably succeed because I can't defend against, somebody who's willing to die in the attempt.
Right.
Whereas you can be secure enough to weather the others, though it's really hard.
Wow, this got really dark.
Yeah, it really gets dark when I talk. It's
dark at the top of the pyramid.
Well, so we have a slide where we talk about the mitigations, and I gave you some of the mitigations for the low levels. We don't have enough time to talk about all of them.
Yeah.
But do you know what the mitigation for the nation state level is?
Go live in a forest somewhere.
No.
In space.
Prayer.
There you go.
There's no way.
It's just, if one of the top 100 nations decides you're done, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Well, let's leave it there on that happy note. Thank you guys. It's always, dare I say, fun. It is fun. It's fun. And every week I feel like I'm a little less doomed just knowing that you guys
are not doing
there.
This right then.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Carl.
Thanks, Dwayne. Thanks, Pat.
See you guys later.
All right, we'll see you next week on Security This Week.